All right. Let's continue our mini lessons and finally see our product backlog. We mentioned the term product backlog 100 times, but we haven't seen it yet. Here is the sample of product backlog, guys. Product backlog, guys, product backlog. Nice to meet you. Now, okay, how many columns? We have several columns in product backlog, okay? The first column is the requested thing from stakeholders, okay? It could be in theme level, epic level, or feature level. So this is the first column. The next column is user stories. Whatever requirement we have from stakeholders, guys, we need to break it down into the smallest size possible, which is called user stories. And user stories need to have what? 2 points. Need to have the same format and have invest characteristics. Very important point. So the second column is user story. For our example, we have broke down that appointment management feature or epic into, for example, 4 user stories. Okay. Now, in the third column, for each user story, we're going to have acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are the conditions that specific user story need to have, so we consider that user story as done. Guys, there is a difference between definition of done, DOD, which we covered in part 1, and acceptance criteria, which we're talking right now. What's the difference? So acceptance criteria is specific for each user story. As you can see here, for example, for user story number 1, US1, as a patient, I want to book appointment online so I don't need to call the hospital. The acceptance criteria are patient selects doctor and date, email confirmation sent. So these 2 conditions, when development team build that user story, now we test and see if these 2 conditions are actually being met. If these 2 conditions are met, we consider that user story done. This is acceptance criteria. Now, what is definition of done? Guys, definition of done is one checklist for all user stories, okay? So we don't have DOD for each user story. No, we have one single DOD that applies for all user stories. For example, in that DOD, we may say all user stories need to be reviewed by senior manager. All user stories need to be, for example, tested. All user stories need to be deployed. So reviewed, tested, deployed. This is the steps, okay? All user stories need to be taken these 3 steps. So we say they met DOD, okay? So DOD applies to all user stories and it's a checklist. We check, okay, if this user story has been reviewed or tested or and then deployed. And once they are done, okay, we go and see if they meet the acceptance criteria or no. Now acceptance criteria zoom on each user story. And another difference, guys, DOD, that checklist is made by the team, development team come up with the DOD. But acceptance criteria is by product owner. Product owner come up with acceptance criteria, like consult stakeholders and the customer, and then come up with acceptance criteria for each user story. These are the differences between acceptance criteria and DOD. We're going to dig into DOD, DOR acceptance criteria in quality part of the tutorial. So just have this overview for now. Now, this is the third column. The fourth column of product backlog is priority. How important that user story is. Guys, one thing. Can development team start working and building all user stories at once? Of course no. They have limited capability, limited time. Okay, they cannot build all user stories in one sprint. No. So the user stories in product backlog need to be prioritized by product owner, which is voice of our stakeholders, voice of our customer, okay? So the development team now know, okay, which user stories are more important for the customer. Let's build those user stories first and then build, for example, lower priority user stories. For our example, user story number 1 has high priority. User story number 2 has also high priority. User story number 3 is medium. So what does it mean? It means the development team don't go and start user story number 3. No, they start with the highest priority user stories. And the last column is story points. What's story points, guys? Story points are the effort needed to complete that user story. Okay? And how do we come up with the story points? You're gonna learn in future mini lessons of this part, don't worry. But remember, the higher the number, it means that user story takes more time and effort to be completed. Okay, for example, user story number 1 has a story points of 8. User story number 2 has a story points of 5. What does it mean? It means user story number 1 takes more time and effort to be completed because it has, for example, more complex technical coding and etc. Okay, now guys, let's wrap it up. This is a typical product backlog, and we know the most important document is product backlog. And who owns product backlog? Faster. Thank you, product owner. Guys, before the team could start working on user stories, we need to make sure, or I better say product owner needs to make sure all columns of these product backlog is completed. Team cannot pull user stories that, for example, does not have the acceptance criteria or does not have the priority or story points. Okay, that's why the completeness of product backlog is very, very important. Now, guys, from now on, let's zoom on column number 4 and 5. Priority and story points. Okay, how do we prioritize our user stories? We're gonna see and learn about some methods that we use in Agile projects to prioritize user stories. And we will continue to story points after prioritization methods. Okay, how do we know, okay, how much effort we need to complete a user story? How do we assign numbers, that 8, 5, 3, 8? How do we get to those numbers? So we're gonna have lots of fun. Now, I think we have built a good foundation of, okay, what is product backlog and how it looks like. Let's continue our mini lessons with prioritization methods. With your beautiful smile and confidence, let's get it done, guys.